Ray Fittipaldo of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette made a somewhat surprising prediction yesterday on 93.7 The Fan and said that his expectation is, well, if the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make a splash at any position this offseason, his big name, his biggest names, I should say, is at corner. That he expects the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have been talked about the completely other way all offseason long, to go out there and sign a name like Byron Murphy from the Minnesota Vikings, a name like Charvarius Ward from the San Francisco 49ers, and bring them to the Pittsburgh Steelers to pair with Joey Porter Jr. and most likely Nate Hobbs. He did not say that, but we could add that little twist into this scenario. Makes you rethink a lot of things, because we have been completely under the assumption that the Pittsburgh Steelers are not going after a big name corner, that they are very comfortable spending minimal dollars on the cornerback position. Now, a lot of variables come into play here. The quarterback position is one of them, but I also think the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are most likely not going to spend a boatload of money at wide receiver, that they most likely are not going to spend a boatload of money at defensive tackle because they're going to draft them, that they have $62-63 million sitting around, and they're saying we're not going to just go into the season with 50 mil. We're not just going to sign Justin Fields. He's going to take on, because even if Justin Fields takes a 2-year, $40 million deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers, his cap hit in 2025, in my eyes, is no bigger than $12 million. There's just, like, that's all going to be backloaded. That's how the Steelers have always operated. That's how Omar Khan deals most of his contracts. I have a hard time believing that Justin Fields in a deal for the Steelers, his first year probably comes with a fully guaranteed deal, or a fully guaranteed year, but that fully guaranteed year is probably significantly lower than the second year, which is where he'd make his money if he can prove that he's a starter for the long term for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So they're sitting around saying, well, we have $50 million. We're going to go spend 25 of that on wide receivers. Maybe. We don't need a defensive tackle. We're going to clear more money with TJ Watt, Larry O, maybe Cam Hayward, maybe Alex Highsmith, maybe Minka, so on and so forth. We just cleared $5 million with Cole Holcomb. I mean, we got money to spend. He says corner. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say no. Surprising? Definitely. Could it happen? I mean, it's crazy if the Pittsburgh Steelers ignore the cornerback position and don't spend money elsewhere. And right now, if you just lay it all out there, I don't know where they're spending that money. So maybe this is a position that Ray is hearing some stuff about, that the Steelers have adjusted their thinking, because that's definitely a possibility. And they're ready to go out there and make a splash signing. I'm okay with it, to be honest. I'm not totally upset if the Steelers do it financially smart to go out there and get a guy like Byron Murphy. I mean, him and Joey Porter Jr. for the next 3 years sounds like a great idea in my eyes. You know, Charvarius Ward for the next 2 years with Joey Porter Jr. sounds like a great idea in my eyes. DJ Reed, Darius Slay, I think I would add into that list. All good ideas for the Pittsburgh Steelers if it's not going to cost them, a situation where they can't go out and get another position. I don't think it's going to cost them that, because I just don't know where that money is going to be allocated at this point in the offseason. You just lost Christian Kirk. Which we'll talk about in a minute here. You could go after a Tyler Lockett. You could go after a DK Metcalf. But unless you're going to do one of those massive wide receiver signings or go sign Sam Darnold, you're going to have excess money. And if the Steelers want to spend it at corner, and we'll get into bold predictions here in a little bit, but if the Steelers want to spend it at corner, I honestly think it might work in their favor, where they could target all these other positions and feel pretty good about it. I think corner is a position that is not easy to fill, but comes with cheaper options where the drop-off isn't as significant as other positions. That being said, I will never undervalue a superstar. Byron Murphy, in my eyes, is a superstar. I mean, the guy's had 9 interceptions in 2 seasons, 6 a year ago, played for Brian Flores, who you got to give him credit at all times. You have to give him all the respect he's due. I don't know. I look at Byron Murphy. Charvarius Ward is less interesting in my eyes. I mean, I think he's a good corner, but if you're going to go all in, if you're going to make this move, go get Byron Murphy. If this is the prediction that is on the table, if this is the scenario that's on the table for the Steelers, I say go get Byron Murphy and say, we have a 27-year-old who just turned 27 and a 24-year-old, 25-year-old in Joey Porter Jr., and both of them are studs. I'd be very much okay with that if everything else is situated to where you're not taking anything away from another position. But to be honest, I don't think that they necessarily would be, unless they're going to go sign a quarterback to $40 million a season. And that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that have occurred in the last couple of weeks that have kind of made this more of a reality and more of something that I would agree with, because all offseason long, I've been pretty, hard on my stance that they shouldn't spend a lot of money on the defensive side of the football. If they're going to sign big contracts, it should be at the wide receiver position. It should be on the offensive side of the football. But a couple of things have happened that have kind of softened my stance a little bit. First and foremost, we may have over-evaluated what Justin Fields is going to get paid. We were saying 20 to 25, and we've heard as low as 10 now. We have talked about 15 being probably that middle mark. And if that's the case, again, it's a nominal amount, but it's an amount that plays into a bigger picture here. And secondly, the defensive line prospects have jumped off the page, not just the top prospects, who are, I think, in higher esteem now than they were before the combine. Guys like Kenneth Grant, guys like Walter Nolan. But the depth of this draft has been highlighted in such a way over the last couple of weeks that you start to kind of push back the idea of, well, they're going to bring in Javon Hargrave because he's been here and he fills a role and they need him. It makes you think, okay, that is a position that they could just fully address at the NFL draft. And if that's the case, we always say the Steelers defense is built from the big guys backwards. Well, they have all the other big guys signed. They shored up their inside linebacker room, and they can do it even more so with Landon Roberts. But you look at that front seven, you have your outside linebackers pretty much set. You would have your defensive line set with those guys in the draft, and you have some excess money to toss around. Yeah, maybe it does make some sense to go for a cornerback. This is the first time all offseason that I'm kind of seeing the reasoning behind it. With that said, I don't think I would throw the bag at anybody, but if you can bring in a Byron Murphy, that does elevate your secondary much higher than bringing back a Dante Jackson. And that's the thing. For the most of this offseason, me and you have sat on this podcast and said that there are 2 free spaces for the Pittsburgh Steelers in free agency this year. Tendering Jalen Warren, which even Omar Khan at the combine said, yeah, we're just going to tender him. Like, okay. And we're just going to do that. And re-signing Dante Jackson, because it doesn't elevate your ceiling all that much to bring him back, but it doesn't hurt your floor very much at all. So we thought that those were the 2 free spaces, but if they're saving money on defensive line, and if they're not going to go out and spend big on a wide receiver like a T. Higgins or a DK Metcalf, you do have some money. If you go from a T. Higgins down to a Darius Slayton, that extra money could be used on a quarterback. And I think that's why I've softened on my stance.
I agree. We agreed most of the offseason on this. This is not a debate. We've gone back and forth on the Justin. We've gone back and forth on as close as or as recently as DK Metcalf. Dante Jackson has been surprisingly the guy that we're just like, yeah, that, you know what? That feels good. We're okay. This one feels like the right move. But if you're going to make a splash, if you're going to improve your defense, it's never a bad idea to improve your defense. Never. And if the Steelers have options, because that's the thing, is if you got to pick between, like you pointed out, if you had to pick between your defensive front or your defensive back in Pittsburgh, you pick the defensive front every single time. That is how they've always won. That is how they've always built their defense. That is how they will continue to build their defense. But if you've got that under control, which they do, seems pretty good right now, then you look at the secondary and you say, what's our missing pieces? You look at the whole defense and you say, what are the missing pieces? The missing pieces are an outside guy, a slot corner, and a backup safety. And I think you could go get all those. And if you want to spend a little bit extra money on the outside corner, I don't think anybody should be sitting here saying that is a bad idea. Don't go do that, especially in a draft class where you want to go attack. Like it opens the door, because again, we'll get to bold predictions here in a second, but it opens the door for the Steelers to double dip it at defensive tackle, for the Steelers to go get a running back or wide receivers or all these other big splashy positions and ignore a cornerback position that is really deep in the NFL draft. But there are a lot of NFL drafts where the cornerback position seems to stand out. And if the Steelers want to say, hey, Byron Murphy's a surefire thing, we don't have to worry about that, that seems to make a lot of sense to me, so that you could focus on, it's compare and contrast. The cornerback market right now in free agency is much better than the defensive tackle market. So go get defensive tackles in the NFL draft, go get corners in free agency. That just makes sense to me. It's like the wide receiver running back market. You're not going to go re-sign Najee. You're going to go get wide receivers. Why? Because running back is so deep in the NFL draft that you should go and get somebody in the NFL draft. You should go get defensive tackles in the NFL draft. And I'm pretty okay with it. Byron Murphy's the name for me. Charvarius Ward, DJ Reed, great, but definitely a step below Murphy in my eyes. Murphy's 27, just seems to be hitting his stride. He's probably going to get close to $20 million a year. That's a lot of money for a corner. But if he can make that sort of impact, I mean, that's a dude who, again, he had 9 interceptions in the last 2 years. That's impressive. That's impressive. I mean, Dante Jackson had 5 interceptions last season, and we're talking about it. He didn't really look that good. Byron Murphy's got 6, and everybody's saying he might be the best top 5 corner in the NFL. And that's a guy the Pittsburgh Steelers would love to have on their side. And look at the last time they did this with Joe Hayden. Worked out in their favor. You might as well go try it again and see if it works.